Welcome to NCIX Tech Tips. Today we're going to be covering a topic that I've been meaning to do for a very long time. This is price to performance ratio in the context of choosing components for your system. So we're going to be looking specifically at a case study on video cards, but this can be applied to a wide variety of different system components. So I'm going to start at the very lowest end of our 3 video card sampling that we have. This is the GT210. It's a $30 graphics card. It has 512 megs of RAM. It has HDMI output, and it's 30 bucks. So it sounds like a pretty wicked value. It's a $30 video card. How do you go wrong? All right, we've got a GTX 560 Ti. Now, the cheapest 560 Ti I could find was 210 bucks after a mail-in rebate. And the 560 Ti has 1 gig of graphics memory, and it has a more advanced processor. It has dual DVI out, HDMI audio out, all that good stuff. And it's quite a bit more expensive than the GT210. Now finally, we've got the GTX 580. This is the highest end single GPU graphics card from NVIDIA at the time of filming. We couldn't find any cheaper than 500 bucks, which puts it at more than double the price of a GTX 560. And it does provide a great performing gaming experience. However, we should really be looking at how it compares in terms of price to performance ratio if we want to explain how to shop for the value conscious computer purchaser. So I figured what better way to benchmark our video card performance than to use the latest and greatest shooter from Crytek, and that is Crysis 2. So I've got a little run through that I do here that I'm very accustomed to doing exactly the same way. And I will be doing this exact run through of this camp using Fraps to record my average frame rate 3 times on each card to ensure that I'm getting consistent results. And then I will show you guys what kind of performance numbers I was able to achieve on each of the cards. Then we're going to compare that to what the price for those cards is, and we will be able to determine what is the best value. Because value is not always about how many dollars you spend. More often than not, it's about how much you get for the dollars that you spend. So pretty much, like so many things I've said before, it always comes down to what are the customer's actual needs. Now, for the sake of this video today, I am only looking at price to 3D graphics performance in a specific game. It's usually more complicated than that. There are features that will matter to some people, but not to others, as well as there being factors that really are not performance factors, such as aftermarket coolers that are more quiet or that keep the GPU running colder. So you got to bear that in mind. It's not always down to just this. It's not a cut and dried formula, but here are the results. All right, guys, so here's the results as well as an explanation of a couple things that I think are important. So here with my GT210, I paid 30 bucks. I got 2.7 FPS. 2.7 FPS is not playable. I didn't even get past the truck because I couldn't even control what I was doing. The game actually slowed down. Things weren't even happening in real time anymore. So my dollars per FPS, this is a very expensive card if I'm going to game on it. I'm paying $11 per frame per second I can get in Crysis 2. By the way, I was running at 1080p in extreme mode, which you would obviously never do on a card like this, but I needed to do so for an apples to apples comparison. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, we've got the GTX 580. It's 500 bucks. I got 64.5 FPS. There's no doubt that it is the highest performing card in my testing, but the dollars per FPS works out to almost 8 bucks. So I'm paying about $8 per frame per second that I'm getting in this game. So that's my price to performance ratio on that one. Finally, here we have the GTX 560 Ti. Now there's a very specific reason I included the 560 Ti, and that's because it is one of the best value video cards on the market today. Not because it's cheap. It's not cheap. It's over $200, and it can be up to $250, up to $260 for some of the overclocked versions. But check this out. So I get, for 210 bucks or even 250, I get almost 50 frames per second, which works out to somewhere in the $4 to $5 per FPS as a price to performance ratio. So that is clearly, since lower is better, the best value card in my comparison, even though it costs 6 times what a GT210 does. It outperforms it by such a significant ratio that it doesn't even matter that it costs more because you're just getting so much more for your money. So down here I'm going to show you a couple things. This is performance per dollar. So right around here at the bottom we'd have our 210 because it has horrible performance per dollar, but it's very cheap. Here on the bottom axis I have price. Right here we have something like a 560. So that is where we have the best performance per dollar and at the optimal price. So this is what's known right here as the sweet spot. There's usually a variety of cards from the NVIDIA side as well as the AMD side which fit in here, which are all fairly comparable in terms of their price to performance ratio. It comes down to features, coolers, all that kind of stuff we mentioned before. Now here we're going to have something like the GTX 580. So as you get past the sweet spot, yes, you do get more performance, but your performance per dollar starts to go down. So that is why something like a 560 is more popular than a 580, although there are still people out there, such as myself, who are willing to pay the premium to get the highest performing parts available. So that is my little episode on performance per dollar. Don't forget to subscribe to NCIX Tech Tips. So our question at the end of the episode today will be, what was the last graphics card that you bought? And having watched this episode, would you have purchased something different?